But if he looked around him, he was like, oh, I like that guy's clothes. You know, he can paint it. So that's one thing. So some of that scale and perspective, and some of that, like, you're like, huh, did they really have clothes like that? No, they didn't. Not at that time. And so it does skew things a little bit, and I think that's very, very important to understand. But here in this picture, and again, this is coming back to the realism, and there are several Jesse Cornplanter pictures like this as well, where they are drawing, and actually this is a rip-off of Jesse Cornplanter as well, where they are drawing what they are actually seeing. So it's a preservation of culture from right then. It's not, you know, this is a story that's supposed to happen a long time ago. So we see the longhouse in the background, we see some of the all deerskin clothes, even though some of it's contemporary kind of clothes, and, you know, implements like war clubs and things like that. The moccasins are pretty contemporary to the time. But then in here, we see, this is what people look like in the 1930s and 1940s. And again, you can see it closer later, you can't quite see it now. But we see everybody in modern, to that period, clothing, whether it is part of the regalia, they're wearing wool pants or ribbony shirts. The women are covered in the blankets, but they are also inside of the longhouse. And people have said to me, well, I thought longhouses didn't have windows, but they did by the early and all through the 20th century, and even to this day. So he was painting what he saw in the world around him. Even the style of longhouse, not exactly the style of longhouse we lived in 1,000 years ago, it would have been a little bit different, but this would be more into the contact era that we lived in, that kind of longhouse. There's historical drawings of it. So he was basing some of what he was doing on what he could see. Because he, by 1900, we hadn't lived in longhouses for 125 years or more. So there wasn't one he could go and look at. But he could go and look at the contemporary longhouse, like this building, and he could paint what he was seeing in there, flatboard kind of building. This one doesn't have the wood stove. He has another similar image to this, several images like this. You see the wood stove in there and things like that. And so sometimes people say to me, well, why is he painting a wood stove? Well, that's how we kept, and still to this day, that's how we keep the longhouse warm. We're not going to go and have a religious ceremony and freeze to death while we're dancing around. You know, you're going to have some heat. We don't have any baseboard heat or anything, you know, it's a wood stove that's in there, you know, because, you know, how come there's no, you know, open fire? We don't want to light ourselves on fire when we're dancing around. You know? I don't know what else is it, you know, wood stove, you know, go that way. So, and again here, this is some history. This is the Sullivan campaign, the burning of cabins and villages by the Clinton and Sullivan and Van Eyck campaign during the Revolutionary War, things like this. So he is painting, but then he does have some of this kind of artworky kind of stuff, and not a portrait of history or not a portrait of a story. This one is called Progress, and it's a very Western kind of painting. This is not the landscape of New York, if you take a close look at it, but it's supposed to be this kind of westward expansion kind of thing, with people like looking out, you know, towards the mountains and the plains, and there are people going out to colonize. There's a steamboat. I guess it's supposed to be the Missouri River. Unless it's supposed to be the Erie Canal, but it's this idea of progress, like they're coming in it. So we see the natives, but again, contemporary to the time, native clothes. And if you stop and think about it, it's like, hey, you painted native people already in progress. Like, they're not, you know, he's got them on horses too. You know, there's horses in the picture. It's like, horses are progress because we didn't have horses prior to the Europeans. So he's actually saying, oh, it's too bad all these boats and other people are coming. Yeah, well, what are you wearing? And what are you riding? What do you do, you know? And it's almost like he missed the point, like, hey, you showed progress, good or bad. I like electricity. I don't know about the rest of you, but I like it. I got no problem with electricity. So, you know, but again, this is the difference between, like I say, artwork, his idea, and he's trying to sort of send a message, and then like this one, like I saw people praying and I saw people dancing, and then I heard a story and I painted it. And so as you look at some of his work, it is important, and I think this is true of Jesse's work as well, you really have to make that distinction of what was he portraying. A story image that he saw or a piece of artwork because he was an artist. And if you look, I think I have them later here in the thing. He does have some work, like here, here he's showing people's picking wild strawberries. Hey, what did people do traditionally to stay alive? They ate wild strawberries, yes, but we shouldn't have clothes like that. We shouldn't have beadwork on it prior to contact. But this is supposed to be before, people came across the ocean, we picked wild strawberries. Yes, but we didn't dress like that when we did it, that's for sure, But again, he saw us and, yeah, like you're wearing it. That's very true. So it can be a little bit confusing. I'll talk about his portrait work in just a second. Here's his lacrosse game. We're running low, so I'm sorry. I was plugging him. His portrait work is fantastic, and here's some more stories. I'm just trying to get forward quickly to one of his very artistic. Oh, here we go. And you can see the colors on this. This is very artistic, very Fantasia-like that he's painting here. This is when he did get some training, some artistic training, and he started branching out into making art as opposed to just illustrating stories. So you see some of his work like this because he was an artist. And I think that's what artists do. I'm not an artist myself. So, this before my battery runs out, but here is a story, and this is always an interesting one to me. This is Ganosha. Have you ever seen Ganosha in real life? I hope not. Ganosha is a creature that we tell a story about, and Ganosha, translated into English, means butt. Backside. And it's a backside that will eat you. It's literally two legs. It's a creature called the hairy legs, Ganosha, and it's supposed to be like the bottom half of a person's body, no upper part of the body. But you can see it has eyes, and it has a beak, with a very sharp beak, and the thing it wants to do is eat people. That's why it's chasing this fella here. Nobody tells this story. Like, nobody knows this story. Anyway, like I've checked all around, and people keep telling me, oh, you should ask him, down below at how do I go to Canada and say my story. People keep sending me to all these different places to try to find this story, and nobody knows it. I've checked all over, and they'll say, you should go ask this. I already asked that person. Well, go ask this other person. I asked them too. They don't know. People don't know the story. So this is a story that has died out. So this was an effort to capture a story that failed. Because at this time, probably, lots of people knew this creature. Where I come from at Onondaga, we have a similar creature. We call her the basket lady. And she comes with a big pack basket, and if children misbehave, she has a switch, a red willow switch. And she gives them a couple, and then she puts them in the basket, and she takes them out into the forest. And if they come back or don't come back, So to this day, little kids, you better behave. Basketball. I have a picture. If you follow my page, you'll know. Somebody actually made like a mannequin of a basket lady, and every once in a while they put it out by the road. And I always drive one, and I was like, "What's that woman doing out in the rain?" And I got pictures of it. I'm trying to take a selfie next to it and everything. But Ganosha is the basket lady, or long nose, or high hat. Different names at different places, but we don't have this story anymore. So I took this painting and the few notes associated with it at the museum, and I made one up. And you can read it online, it's still on there. And people look at it now and they think, oh, that's an old story. No, it's not. I just made it up based on the fragments of an old story that I could put together. And there is something downstairs, I think it's still on display, and people say it's supposed to be a flying head, but when I look at it like that, it is Ganosha. It's not a flying head. Flying head's different, So if you go downstairs, you'll see it. It's a cornhouse piece with some fur, but it looks like, and it's a person who I think might be a flying head. So this is what I'm saying is that these different images that Ernie was doing and Jesse were doing, it was really in this huge effort to preserve culture. And I am inspired by what they did because, like I said, at this time, it was something that was changing. The world was changing. We think about how, there's times of rapid change and then slower change and things like this. And right now, of course, we are in a time of incredibly rapid change. How many of you went to college when there was a thing called the internet? Not me. I graduated before the internet. Yes, I am actually older than most people think I am. So, when the internet was invented in 1992, I was like, how come they didn't have that when I graduated? Like, that would have made school a lot easier. Okay? Yeah. And, how many of you, grew up with a corded phone in your house? All those kinds of things. Whatever it might be. But we're in this time of very rapid change. And so this was happening a bit to Native peoples. As they got through the 19th century and all the things that happened in relationship to the state and federal government, the peoples getting removed to far-flung places, whether it was Oneidas going up to Wisconsin or moving to Canada, or people getting shipped down to what was then called Indian Territory, that they would call Oklahoma, and not just Haudenosaunee people, but all Native peoples that were going through this rapid change in relationship with the peoples around us. But then we get to this time of the early 20th century, and we see that most Native Americans who are still here, and if you look at the pictures from Onondaga at the time, people came to get their portrait done in their Sunday best. And they wanted to look good to have their picture taken. And the guy who took these pictures, his name was Selkirk, he actually had to pose the Native Americans in like borrowed traditional clothes. And you like stand there with a war club. Did you get it? No, take your club back. So he had to pose them because it didn't exist anymore. But he also took pictures of people's farms and their horse and buggy and things like that. And there's a book called Onondaga Portrait of the Native People. You can look at all these pictures if you want to. So this was a time that people were changing away from tradition. And I think it's important that people like Jesse Cornplanter, like Ernie Smith, like Arthur Parker, and some others really put in an effort to preserve this culture, to preserve it forever. If Uncle Ernie had never painted this picture, this story would be lost forever. But because he painted it, because I can look at it, because I can see a few notes written about it, today I can make up a story about it. And I made up a story in our tradition. It wasn't just like, aliens came down here, like I didn't make up something brand new. Like I made up a traditional Haudenosaunee story. And probably someday somebody else will tell that same story and they'll say, this is a traditional Haudenosaunee story. And it will be, but if they say it's old, no, it's not. It comes from an old story idea, but it's a new version of it. And I've done the same thing with the maple sugar story as well. So it is important that they did this work so that today people like me could continue to share these elements of culture. We have to be a little bit careful because, like I say, some of the clothes and things like that that they put in there, maybe, this is supposed to be the before time. No, that's what people wore after we had contact. So you have to, interpret it a little bit. But the work that they did to preserve this was incredibly important as we continue to go forward. And now that we see this time of rapid change again, and there are many people who are interested in Native culture within our own communities, but they're grappling with finding the way of how to express it. And my own daughter is, she studied new media design. So she can design for you, her senior project was a 3D poster. Literally you could walk by it with your phone and it looks like just a flat poster and you hold your phone up to it and whoop, the people jump out off the screen at you. Okay, I got no idea how she does it, but to her, it was not even a big deal. Okay, but that is what we can do with culture. And we have to find the way that we can preserve culture today. And we have to find the way that we can teach culture today. Because this is not how we learn it anymore. And we don't learn it by reading those books that people like Cusack and Arthur Parker wrote down. Unless you're a big egghead like me and you read them all. But most people don't want to learn that way. They want to learn with something like that, or like that, And so I think this is the next iteration of what we'll do, even here at the museum. We show contemporary native Haudenosaunee artwork. We're going to need more of these in the coming years, because this is where artwork is headed to. But it will come from this idea as well. So thank goodness these people drew these things. Thank goodness Uncle Ernie stole Jesse's ideas and other ideas. And that these people got together and for a couple of years put all this artwork together, because we have it forever. You can go see it. A lot of it at the Rochester Museum, some of it's still at Tonawanda. Even families have it. And Ernie painted on anything for anyone. Like, oh, it's your birthday? Happy birthday. And he gave people pictures like that. And he, unfortunately, Uncle Ernie was a raging alcoholic, and so he would say, he actually painted a mural in a bar to clear his bar tab. That mural, it existed as long as the thing was there. Lots of people remember it. But he worked and worked and worked and worked. He was a working artist, and he had a little shop, and he could draw cards, and people would come and buy them for special occasions, things like that. But he painted on boards, he gave birthday presents, all kinds of things. So when we see his work, it's important that whatever the reason was that he was doing it, whatever his motivation was, it was to preserve that idea of culture. And one of the great things that he did, I said I'd come back to it quickly, was some of his portrait work. And he was great. Really, I think this is some of his best work, is the portraits that he drew and painted of people around him. So there is this great record of who was who. Because even, I was talking to my dad the other day about our family, because this is on my father's side of the family. My dad is Tonawanda Seneca. And even for a few years, we had arguments within the family about what clan Ernie was from. And we sort of settled on the fact that he is Heron clan, or was Heron clan. But his brother, my great-grandfather, who I'm named after, was Snipe clan. I know that for a fact. So, they had different moms, but the same dad. That's how they were, so they were half-brothers. And so he actually painted lots of these portraits of people that people still have in their own personal collections. And there are some in the museum collections and in other collections as well. So it's a great thing that if we, at some point in time, could look at more of these, and lots of people talk to me, they know, he's my great uncle. Oh, I have a picture, I have Ernie's, he came to my dad's house and he, drew my mom and dad, or, we got it hanging up in the living room, or, I'm like, well, hang on to it, it's pretty valuable, and they're like, no, it's just a family picture, So, but we can see who was who. Because, they often wrote down, this was this person, this clan, whatever it might be. And so we have a record of the human beings that existed contemporaries to Ernie, because he painted them. And, sometimes in their traditional clothes, sometimes in their modern, or the time, clothes. And so I think that is a very important thing that he did as well, to give us that snapshot of primarily Tonawanda. But he traveled, he went to Cattaraugus, he went to Allegheny, other places. So we have a living, if you would, snapshot of what people look like at the time. And I think that's important as we go forward, because it reminds us where we come from. So we can take all the work that they did, and Jane Beaver and Jesse Cornplanter as well, and take that realism and continue to move it forward in the way that artwork will move forward. I can't, my daughter can do it, I can't do it. And other young people. And I know Honey is coming, Honey David is coming from Upper Sesame, and he is doing more in like a graphic novel kind of style. Wonderful, great. And there are other people that are working on plays and television and all kinds of 3D and YouTube videos and whatever it might be. And that is the way that we'll preserve culture today. But it all starts with you guys. So I'm glad that we have this exhibit up. I'll be around for a little while and looking at some. If you got specific questions about some of the artwork, I'm happy to answer the questions for you. I would leave you with my pick for the Kentucky Derby. But she was scratched this morning. So I got to go back and look at the racing form before I can get my pick. But thanks for being here today. I appreciate y'all coming out. Hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about it.